Welcome back to the Call Up, your go-to podcast on the future stars of Major League Baseball. I'm Aram Layton. He's Jack McMullen. And we got a new week here where we're going to be talking about promotions, but not to the big leagues. We've been talking about promotions to the big leagues, and now we want to give shine on all the other prospects at all the other levels. And I felt like this was a really good way to maybe talk about prospects that are trending upwards. You brought this idea too, and we were like same page because I was so excited to pitch the same idea to you. And I was like, boom, because there are so many players right about this time of year, Jack, that now hit their challenge for the rest of the season. Or if you have a double-A guy, this is kind of the time where you want to bump him to triple to see if you could get him up to the big leagues by the end of the year. So a lot of different players at a lot of different levels moving. And we want to add context to that and kind of just follow up and talk about how those guys may handle the challenge and, why they may have got bumped up.
Yeah, so the Super 2 deadline just passed at the major league level, so you'll start to see some guys, get up for their big league debut or be up in earnest now. But for some reason, that feels like it loosely correlates to other roster spots being open in the upper minors and maybe high A guys moving to double. I think this is probably the first checkpoint that you have in the minor league baseball season where guys start to go up or down based on performance. Typically it's need through the first 2 months of the year. Now with minor league opening day at the AAA level being on March 31, we are April, May, mid-June. We're 2.5 months in.
Yeah,
I think guys have proven that it's not just a hot start. They are succeeding. If you're good 2.5 months into a season, you're having a good season. It's not just, hey, a hot start, let's see if he cools down. So I think that probably validates guys' success at the lower levels and they get the bump up. That may also validate some big time struggles for guys that don't necessarily have prospect pedigree and they may move down, and those are the corresponding moves. I saw it a lot in the Pirates system. We've had, kind of a turnstile. Henry Davis, who I know we're going to talk about, goes to the big club. We had Kyle Nicholas get the bump from double to triple. We had Jared Jones get the bump from double to triple. Anthony Solomito got the bump from high A to double. There's been a lot of movement, and that got me thinking, hey, what about the other guys? I just watched Daniel Palencia throw fuzz in AAA, so I know we're going to talk about him. And I saw the Judd Fabian tweet that Fabian's going up to double, and I was like, dude, there are a bunch of guys that are getting bumps right now.
100%. And you kind of got me back on track here. We do want to open up with the promotions to the big leagues because we always got to talk about those. Emmet Sheehan's debut real quick, and then we'll get into all of those promotions. I'm excited to talk about Sheehan's debut. I actually also want to get into it on the Just Baseball show with you a little bit later when we go record that, because the Dodgers prospect was as good as advertised in his first career start. So that came on the 16th. What was that, Saturday?
Friday.
So Friday against the rival Giants, who are playing great baseball right now. That was a game that the Dodgers ultimately lost, right? Because the Giants, I believe, have won 7 in a row as we're recording this.
So.
But it wasn't due to Emmett Sheehan. It was kind of due to the rest of the bullpen, because Sheehan went 6 innings of no-hit ball, 2 walks, 3 Ks. I put out a thread before Sheehan's debut breaking down his arsenal, and I'll link that in the podcast description so you can check that out, because I think Sheehan has a really unique arsenal. And I think Sheehan is also an example of something that's kind of missing in Stuff Plus, which I wanted to talk about a little bit, which is a statistic that has become very popular. And I think is an excellent tool, like so many other statistics. But I also think that if you use it in a lazy way, that will kind of leave you maybe lacking context as to how this guy can get outs, because Stuff Plus is not going to give Emmett Sheehan his due. Big reason why is vertical attack angle. And that's kind of the number one thing that I think is overlooked and still trying to be properly quantified in terms of importance in Major League Baseball. Trust me, it is incredibly important. Vertical approach angle is also, what is probably more commonly known as. It's basically what the perspective is when you release the baseball. The lower that it is, the flatter approach angle, meaning the lower you want to be, right around -4. If you can get below -4, you're elite. And Sheehan's at -3.8. That's right there with Brian Wu. That's right there with Joe Ryan. And so the shape is less important at that point, because if if you are releasing from a negative 3.8% or percent degree attack angle, you don't need 20 inches of induced vertical break because it's looking like it's carrying from a lower release point. If you release higher, you want more induced vertical break. So long-winded thing here, Sheehan's fastball didn't have the 20 inches of induced, and it has a little bit of horizontal, so it has ride. And they were getting labeled as sinkers. They're not sinkers because of where it's being released from. If it was being released from a high point, then based on the way the ball moves, yeah, it would probably almost play like a sinker, almost like a dead zone pitch to a degree. But he releases it from a low point, and it's pretty flat and runs to the arm side. It's not a sinker because he's releasing it from so low. So that's kind of what I wanted to get into. If anyone has questions about that, tweet at me. I'll notice the notification. I'll dive deeper into it. But it was a misreading. Stuff Plus labeled it as a sinker, and it got a worse Stuff Plus grade, even though it was playing great.
So yeah, that's the thing. And like, I'm going to try and convert that. You did a really good job converting that into common English. I'm going to try and, dumb it down even more, and like not dumb it down, but simplify a little bit more. It was an incorrect tag, I guess. It may be tagged because of the arm slot as a mediocre sinker. It's not a mediocre sinker. It's a very unique four-seam fastball.
Yeah.
And if you haven't listened to Walker Buehler on the Just Baseball show, he spent about 5 minutes on Emmett Sheehan, and he was saying a lot of the same things that you were. It's such a unique and funky delivery. Like Walker said, it's a wacky throw. And that's exactly what it is. Like, Emmet Sheehan offers something that is not seen often at all. Joe Ryan offers something that is not seen often at all. And that is a very unique release point on a four-seam fastball.
Yeah.
Sheehan's going to be good because he deviates from the norm. He deviates from the norm in terms of the release point. Yeah, so that's not an average sinker. It's a good four-seamer from a very unique release point. And Walker made a great point. Like, that is where he can survive in the early goings. As he fine-tunes everything else, he has the chance to thrive while he figures shit out because he's so unique.
100%. So that's the biggest thing. The last thing we'll say on Sheehan's debut here is, I mentioned in that thread, fastball is a 70 pitch. It's up to 97, 98, but his secondaries flash above average to plus, but he's just a little sporadic with them. And that's exactly what we saw in that debut. He threw 15 changeups, 10 were balls. He threw 13 sliders, 6 were balls. It didn't matter because he had that backbone pitch that can get you through it. He's capable of striking out 10 in a start. He didn't strike out 10 because the secondaries weren't there. Guys were able to get a piece of the fastball, but not a good piece. And that's what's such a great, I think, baseline for Sheehan, and what makes him, I think, a safer starter than most guys with his command issues. And I wouldn't say issues, but like fringy command is when you have that fastball going for you. The last thing I want to say real quick is the lower the release point, the harder it is to make the ball carry upwards. You think high three quarters, what tends to happen with those kind of guys? It runs to your arm side because you're kind of getting to the side of it. So that's why people talk about like pronators and the way you kind of are able to release the ball. If you can release the ball from a low release point, but still keep the ball kind of back spinning, that's where it's just, you're in that outlier territory where there's few guys that are able to do that. And it makes the ball look like it is ascending.
And he's built in a unique way too. Like he's a big guy, but it's all arms and legs, right? He almost looks like he's got a smaller torso than typical. So he gets down on the mound really well with his legs, and he can get to unique angles with his arms, with how long his arms are. So his unique physical build, like actually his genetics, help him deviate from the norm as well. So
absolutely.
Yeah, man. Think about what you just said. Like, he didn't have command of his secondaries, and he went 6 no-hit in his major league debut.
Yeah. So, and I mean, that's what really stands out. And yeah, sure, the league will adjust to the fastball a little bit. They'll get used to that release point a little bit more. But when that happens, hopefully he finds more feel for the slider and changeup, which can be plus pitches, like could be nasty. The guys were not hitting either of them. It's just whether he locates them. Through the minor leagues this year, opponents at 109 against his slider and 111 against his changeup. So when it's there, it's lights out. Real quick on Henry Davis and Jacob Amaya, and then we'll get into the rest of the promotions through the minor leagues. Henry Davis, former #1 pick, catcher, gets brought up to the big leagues. Very short time for you to be able to watch Henry Davis, which is funny because we kind of had a feeling that might happen. And what I think stands out the most to me, Jack, is how much right field he played. He played a lot of right field in those 10 or so games that he played for the Indianapolis Indians. I haven't watched the video. I think it's 3 games at catcher and 7 or 6 in right field.
Yep.
How did he look in right field?
He looked good.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Good. He made a diving catch. He's got a hose. We know how that hose plays from behind the dish. Like, that thing eats in right field. I think if I was in Ben Cherington or Derek Shelton's chair, I'm looking at Endy as the catcher, and I'm looking at Davis as the Dalton Varsho, where he can catch 50 games a year, but he can play a really good defensive right field for 100.
I think you're right. And, and then again, the ebbs and flows of the season can dictate that. God forbid Endy goes down. Okay, now Henry can be your everyday catcher. The other wrinkle of it too is Endy Rodriguez going into this year was a more well-rounded prospect and I think a safer bat.
Yep.
But in terms of offensive upside, and I'm curious if you agree with this after seeing both of them up close and personal, I love Endy Rodriguez. But in terms of offensive upside with the kind of power and field to hit combination and approach that Davis has, his offensive upside is all-star. I think Endy's game is predicated on well-rounded, good field to hit, switch hitter, and he'll sneak enough homers out of there. Henry Davis can hit 30 homers and still, I think, put together a pretty good batting average on base percentage. So that's a guy that you want to keep him fresh, move him around, and preserve him long-term, because if Henry Davis is going to be the best outcome of what his profile is, it's hitting 30 pumps and hitting 280. And I think he can do that if it all goes right.
With a 400 OBP.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. Like, I view Endy as like the Gabby Moreno starter kit. I view Endy as just a natural athlete, great hit tool, like low K rate. He's such a smooth catcher.
Might take some time to make a big impact, but very solid. Yeah.
And I love Gabby Moreno. Gabby Moreno is one of my favorite catchers in baseball. And I know he's one of your favorite catchers in baseball too. So I view it as that regard, but Henry is cut from a unique cloth where he was so patient. He gets deep in counts. He walks a lot. He gets hit by a lot of pitches. But then when he puts bat on ball, he's peppering 109s, dude. Like, he was ripping the shit out of the ball. So, yeah, I mean, best case for Henry Davis is 30 pumps and a 400 OBP as a catcher.
I mean, that's a #1 overall pick, man.
And that's the thing. I don't want anybody to view this as a failed mission if Henry Davis is not the catcher for the Pittsburgh Pirates at 1-1. Like, you're taking the best version of Dalton Varsho #1 overall pretty much every year, where he can catch, but he's a great defensive outfielder that can slug.
They took the bat. They took the bat. And they knew that he could probably stick behind the dish, and he can probably stick behind the dish, but they took the bat. And this is a game that's you're trying to take a good bat in the top few picks. It doesn't matter where they can play. Hey, look at Spencer Torkelson. It's all about the bat. So it's one of those things, who, by the way, is heating up and looks great. Yeah. Real quick, when we talk about right field, we got to give ourselves a pat on the back. We floated the idea of Christian Encarnacion Strand playing right field. And that dude, a week later, gets put out in right field in AAA for the Reds affiliate in Louisville for the first time in his, I think, entire baseball career. I don't think he's ever played right field in his entire life. That was so cool. Clay Snowden sent that to me and was like, dude, what the hell? So that was super cool. We called that shot a little bit before. It makes sense. It might take some time, but that arm will play out there. Last promotion to the big leagues real quick before we get to the rest of the leagues. Jacob Amaya to the Marlins. Jacob Amaya was really having a nice stretch there in AAA. Traded to the Marlins from the Dodgers in that Miguel Rojas deal. I don't know how the Marlins are going to play this whole thing. We're going to talk about that on the JB show too. They got a lot of things to sort out, but Amaya, I think, is a great option for them to hit left-handed pitching, play shortstop. He's a good glove. He adds some depth and I think a good bench option. I think he could be better than some of the bench guys that they've got going there, like the Garrett Hampsons and whoever it may be. Some were wondering why Amaya got the nod over Xavier Edwards, who's been great and looked good in short, big league action. It's simple. Amaya can play a high level of shortstop. So I think this is a really good opportunity for him. I think it helps the Marlins in a role that is kind of setting him up for success. Play good defense, hit lefties, and come off the bench in certain spots. And I think Amaya will settle into that role really well. Looks like another solid trade for Kim Ng to go basically swap Miguel Rojas for a younger version of him.
Yeah, no, I think that this is, and I hope that this is a short-term solution at shortstop with a guy that can be a bench piece for a long while. If the Marlins are in contention for a wild card spot at the end of the year, I don't want Jacob Amaya as the starting shortstop on September 15th. But I would love if he's my third middle infielder on September 15th. So no, I thought that this was another awesome trade for Kim Ng. I know, not overwhelmingly. For the most part, you are pro Kim Ng.
Yes.
For the most part, I am pro Kim Ng. Like there are some, transactions that have made you scratch your head a little bit, but for the most part, man, I think she's doing an excellent job as the GM of the Marlins.
I will fully make my kind of put my opinion out there after this draft, because the draft has been where they have been lacking, and that's DJ
and
Sevilla.
Barry was a bad pick. Yeah,
Barry was a bad pick, and they haven't had much to show for the last couple of years, so we'll see there. But I do love what Kim's doing at the big league level so far, and how can you not look at the way they're performing?
Yeah.